Fresno County Sheriff's Office detectives have booked 37-year-old J.D. Torrence of Corcoran into the Fresno County Jail on charges of sexual battery and unlawfully detaining a person. His bail is currently set at $250,000. On June 24th, a citizen reported an allegation of misconduct to the Sanger Police Department. The complaint was made against Sanger Police Officer J.D. Torrence. Sanger Police requested the Sheriff's Office handle the investigation, which we accepted. And I will introduce with me here today Chief Greg Garner of the Sanger Police Department. Sheriff's detectives learned that on June 23rd, while he was on duty, Officer Torrence stopped his patrol vehicle to check on a car parked in the city of Sanger. Inside were a man and a woman. Officer Torrence detained the woman and had her stand next to his patrol car due to possibly being intoxicated. During his interview with the woman, Torrence touched the woman against her will in a sexual manner. The woman realized this was inappropriate behavior, and fearing she would be further assaulted, she walked away to a well-lit business and stayed there until Officer Torrence left the area. Now, I will say that this is very early on in this investigation. We have one victim. We have information of a second victim we're investigating right now. And based on his blatant behavior and his shameless activity that night that happened on a public street, even though it was after dark, we believe this was not the first time Officer Torrence had committed this kind of crime. So the purpose of why we're here today is to ask for any additional victims that may have been too embarrassed or thought they may have been the only one assaulted by this officer, that now is the time to step forward and talk about what happened to them and make sure that we know about it. I will give contact information in just a minute, but at this time I'd like to give Chief Garner an opportunity to say a few words.
Thank you, Sheriff. As Sheriff Mims mentioned, on the 24th of June, our officers were contacted by a citizen who advised us of what we were able to determine was egregious allegations against one of our officers. Once that information was provided to us, we brought that officer in immediately suspended his peace officer powers and put him on administrative leave. At that point, we requested the Fresno County Sheriff's Office to do the criminal investigation. At some point, we'll be initiating an internal investigation as well. Our main focus at this point is the criminal investigation. I want to echo what the sheriff said moments ago. If there is anyone who has any information that is relative to this case or relative to Officer Torrance's conduct, we need you to come forward. You can either contact the Sheriff's Department directly, and in a moment the sheriff will provide that contact information, or contact anyone in my department as well. So, thank you, Sheriff.
So again, currently he has two charges. His bail is currently set at $250,000. However, that could go up if additional information is received about additional crimes. So if anybody has any information, we're asking them to call Sergeant Chad Stokes at 559-600-8144. Or as always, you can call Crime Stoppers, and you can be anonymous, at 498-7867. So again, based on his behavior and how blatant it was, we truly believe that there are additional victims out there. So please come forward to make sure that he is held accountable for what he may have done to you. So are there any questions?
Yes, you mentioned there was a man and a woman in that car. The woman was asked to step out and, was put aside for suspected DUI or intoxicated driving. Did the man happen to say anything that he saw, or was he part of the investigation in any way?
He was allowed to go, of course, and I don't know that he saw anything that happened, but he really wasn't part of the assault. She was with him that night, and it was after dark, late at night. But again, what he did was pretty egregious and offensive and criminal. And we just think that this wasn't the first time he's done this.
Just to confirm, she was in the driver's seat?
I don't know where she was in the car that she was removed from, but she was in the car with a man that she had been with for a while that evening. And she was removed from the car, asked to get out by Officer Torrence, and then they moved to an area where he behaved the way he did.
So the initial, I guess the assumption is that she maybe was was there an initial cause to pull her out of the car? Because if she was intoxicated in the passenger seat, I mean, what would be the purpose of getting her out of the vehicle?
Well, the intoxication charge could have been something like drunk in public, even though she was in a vehicle. But again, I don't think that was the purpose of his contact with her. I believe that could have been the ruse to get her out of the car to do what he intended to do in the first place, and that was to sexually assault her.
When did this second potential victim come forward, or when did you get information about that?
The second victim we have as a result of our investigation and some searches that we did. So she didn't come forward because she reported it. We contacted her after we found evidence of a possible second crime.
Was the victim of the sexual battery the one who filed the citizen's report, or was it somebody else on her behalf?
I believe she's the one that
She was the one
reported
that
it.
filed it.
And I'm going to say this is a difficult thing for a victim to do, especially with a person in authority. That was very brave for her to do, and it took a lot for her to come forward and report his behavior. And the message to the public is, we're going to hold our own accountable. When we find out about things like this that happen, these allegations, we look into it, we investigate it, and if they're found to be true, we'll take the appropriate action and hold them accountable. Because the last thing we want is somebody who behaves like that in a law enforcement position.
Chief Garner, I see some photos of possibly a swearing-in ceremony for Officer Torrence. Can you confirm that he's been with your guys' department since March 28, 2016?
That's correct.
And can you speak about, has there been any other complaints about him inside the department?
I can't speak to that. Those are personnel issues. I can tell you, I'm sorry. I can't speak to that because those are personnel issues, but I can tell you, and I want to say something specifically. I want to thank the Fresno County Sheriff's Department. When we contacted them about this and asked them to investigate this, they literally went nonstop around the clock to get this done, to see if there was a factual basis for these complaints, and if so, to take the appropriate action. And that was a tremendous effort on their part. And as the sheriff mentioned, this is horrible in any circumstance, but it's even more so when it's committed by a law enforcement officer. And that's just something we won't stand for. And I just want to commend the Sheriff's Department for taking up this case and handling it as quickly and as well as they have.
Are you able to comment on some of the investigation that led you to believe that this may have happened multiple times and that this was an egregious crime?
Based on our investigation, he portrayed a pattern of behavior that leads us to believe that this is not his first time. Again, it was just so out there and blatant, and no hesitation of what he did, that we're sure that there are additional victims out there. And so the plea tonight is, if this happened to you, or if you want to report somebody else who may have been a victim, please talk them into being cooperative with us. Give us a call, because he needs to be held accountable. It's a black eye on law enforcement when this happens, and nobody wants to hold a police officer more accountable than us in the profession that are doing the right thing, and we'll take care of business.
Chief, I know that at least under California state law, you can release information if there are sustained findings of sexual assault or dishonesty of a peace officer. Did he have any of those on his file? He did not.
He did not.
And prior to being hired by you guys, did he work for another agency?
I'm not aware of the fact that he had. I know that he's been here for about 5 years now. I don't know what his background was prior to that. he was hired before I took the job as the chief.
Okay, and then we'll take away the second follow-up.
This is kind of a difficult question, but people come to police when these sort of instances happen, when they feel threatened, when they feel unsafe, when they've experienced sexual abuse. What is your message for the people that are hearing this right now, that a local police officer was the one doing this?
Well, I appreciate that question, and again, that really speaks to what I was saying earlier about how grateful we are in the Sanger Police Department, that the Fresno County Sheriff's Department took this case and ran with it as aggressively as they did. The community has to trust this police department, and whenever we have information that indicates that one of our people has violated that trust, we want to act swiftly and certainly to make sure that that's dealt with. And in this case, that's exactly what happened, and I want to reassure the public that in any instance like this, if there's any misconduct alleged, we're going to look at it rapidly, thoroughly, and get to the bottom of it. If it's true, we're going to deal with it. If it's untrue, we're going to let you know. So,
When was he placed on leave? The 24th or as of the arrest?
on the 24th,
On the 24th.
the day we received the information.
Do you guys have any body camera or dash camera video?
I can't speak to that, the Sheriff's Department.
We have no body cam video, even though he was wearing one, it wasn't on.
Chief, let me ask, as far as the department's policy, what is the policy for body camera use for officers?
If he was conducting an enforcement action, his body cam should have been activated by policy.
What time of night did this happen?
It was, the information we received, it was roughly between 9 and 10 o'clock in the evening.
Was there any call over the radio that he was approaching somebody to check on a parked vehicle?
Again, that's part of the criminal investigation. The Sheriff's Department is handling that, so I can't speak to it.
Sheriff Mims, are you able to?
Sure. Well, the information that we have is he did not put himself out on traffic or enter anything into his computer that he was out on traffic.
Do you guys have any other surveillance video or video in the area where this occurred?
We do, but that's, again, still part of the investigation that we're not going to talk about tonight.
Chief, a follow-up to the previous question. Typically, when an officer approaches somebody, stops to check on a parked vehicle or people inside it, is that policy to put that information out over the radio?
It is. Yes. If he was there taking legitimate enforcement action, by policy, he should have let the dispatcher know what he was doing and why he was there.
Since you suspect this has happened before, is there a log of when this officer calls traffic stops in, and have you noticed gaps in his reporting or in his policing that may lead you to believe this could have happened multiple times?
Well, a police officer's day is sporadic between actually being on a call for service and being in a patrol function, if you will. While they're not on a specific assignment, a specific assigned call for service, we can track their location, but we really can't determine what they're doing during that time. It's our hope that they're following policy and enforcing the law. Sometimes, obviously, that's not the case.
Does this make you kind of raise an eyebrow and maybe look at officers more closely in the future, or I don't know how you can prevent something like this from happening, right? But is that a thought on your mind?
Well, to be quite honest with you, I don't know how we can prevent it from happening in the future as well, but I can tell you that we're going to do everything we can to do just that, prevent it from happening in the future. And I think one of the best ways of preventing that is by handling these situations when we become aware of them in the manner that we're handling it now. Quickly, seriously, to the point, and he's facing incredibly serious criminal charges. So I'm hoping that that's going to serve as a deterrent, certainly in our profession, for anybody who's even thinking about stepping outside the law for any reason.
Sheriff Mims, the second victim that through the investigation you guys were able to go back and speak with, did that come based off of search warrants? And if so, were those of work items, home items? Were there search warrants served?
There were, and it was as a result of evidence we seized in those searches that revealed the second victim.
Are you able to say, was his home, was a search warrant served at his home?
Mm-hmm.
Was a search warrant served of his work computer, his office?
I think that's all I'm gonna say about there were searches. It revealed at least one more victim. We do have additional information that we need to look through to see if we can determine that more victims and identify them. And that's why really we wanna put out the public plea tonight, to help us as we go through this, to match something that might have happened to somebody that we found during our searches and what they revealed. So again, even though this happened while he was on duty, in uniform, in a patrol car, we might have more victims that this happened to in the same way in the city of Sanger. We might even have more victims when he was off duty that he might have done something inappropriate with. So no matter what the case was, please give us a call.
Will you guys be going back through his past arrests and cases to look at those to make sure they were all legitimately done correctly and within policy?
Well, we're gonna rely on the folks that are out there listening to this. If they have a concern to come and check on us, we will in all likelihood check to see if there's any concerns we had with any of the conduct that we can see recently that he's been involved in, certainly. But we need people to come forward, so.
This might be out of left field, but were both accusers, did both of them speak English, and did they have no problem recanting everything that happened that night?
Yes, they were
Okay.
fluent English speakers.
And back to that night, in the police report it says that the woman stepped into a well-lit area. She didn't know how to react in that moment, I assume. How should you react in that moment? She didn't want things to escalate from what I hear.
She did the absolute right thing. I mean, she got to an area where she felt safe and was able to be with somebody that she trusted and leave that area. And that was appropriate. It's interesting that another sign that he knew exactly what he did was inappropriate is he didn't come forward and talk about somebody getting away from him if he thought that was a legitimate law enforcement stop. She's the one that came forward the next day and reported this. So I think, again, I want to give her credit for stepping forward. It was a hard thing to do. But the public needs to know there's nothing that is more satisfying than making sure we get people out of this profession that don't need to be in this profession. And that's what we're doing.
Did Officer Torrence have a partner that night?
Okay? Thank you all very much.